Hi everybody, it's Laura. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel. Today I have a layout that I made using the Shimmerz Paints January Color Kits collection. So for this layout, I am using a piece of gessoed white cardstock, and then I'm using a couple of the paints that came in the January kit. So I started off with this really beautiful subtle pink color. This is an Inklingz called Loose Lips Pink Ships. And that color is an Inklingz. You could see it in the little white pan to the right of my layout. So the Inklingz require you to add some water to them. So I'm adding water and then mixing the water into the pigment with a brush. And then I'm spreading the pigment on a piece of plastic for my favorite technique, the packaging technique. I really like to use gesso on my backgrounds. One of the things that comes along with using gesso is that the colors that you put on top of it might not be as intense as if you had added the color to paper that is not gessoed. But I'm okay with that because I do really like the benefits of the gesso. Because it creates a barrier between the paper and the paint, it allows you to move the paint around a little bit more. If you want to remove paint, it's a lot easier with gesso. So I'm perfectly happy with going back in a couple of times and adding the color multiple times to the background. So you can see here that I'm adding a beautiful blue color. This is a Shimmerz called Cold Shoulder. And I think that this combination of the pink and the blue is just beautiful on its own. But I also love the way it really makes me think of a bright winter's day with lots of snow. So I'm a little late with getting my January videos up because I was kind of concentrating on learning how to make reels. So I've started making some reels and I've been posting them on Instagram. So this is totally new to me. I know I'm late to the party on this one. I do always want to have the long version available on YouTube because I have learned so much from YouTubers over the years as far as creating scrapbooking layouts. But there is a huge audience for the reels on Instagram, and so I thought I would try that out too. I see I have to film a little bit differently than I've been filming, but it's fun and I've been enjoying making them. So you can see this layout and my other January Shimmerz layout in a very shortened version on Instagram, and my Instagram is City Scrapper as well. So now I've switched over to a paintbrush and I'm applying the paint that way. The paintbrush gives me a little bit more control and I'm able to add a little bit more paint in certain areas and a little bit less in others. I wanted there to be some areas that are a little darker and some that are a little bit lighter. But you can see that I can't give up that packaging technique, so I kind of switch back and forth between the brush and the plastic. Now I want to add some more blue. Now the Shimmerz is a little bit thicker than the Inklingz. And so I spray some water to water it down, but just naturally it's a little bit of a thicker paint, so I don't have to work as hard to build up the color for the Shimmerz. But once again, it's really because I like to use gesso that I have to build up the color. So now I want to use the stencil that we got in the December kit. I love this stencil. I've used it on, I think, every layout that I've made since we got it. So I use some Crafters Workshop modeling paste, and then I mix that together with some Crafters Workshop Stardust butter, and the color of that is Opalescent. And I don't know if that really adds a lot once I add it to the modeling paste, but I just like to try different combinations. One of the things I love about the stencil is that the snowflakes are in all different sizes on it, and they're kind of placed randomly. On the stencil, it's not a clear pattern, and I think that this really matches my style of making a background. So you can see that this 6x6 inch stencil is placed in all four corners, and then I use my little mixture of modeling paste and Stardust butter, and I spread that through the stencil. And I'm trying to make sure that I have a nice thin coat of the modeling paste. I don't want there to be a really thick layer of modeling paste, especially because this is such a delicate stencil. I really want the delicate nature of these snowflakes to shine through. And then once I was done with the modeling paste, I got my little grungy bottle of watered down white acrylic paint, and now I am adding splatters all over the background. So I continue adding lots and lots of white splatters. And then once the background was dry, I was thinking that there were a couple of spots that I wanted to go back into with the stencil and add a snowflake here and there. So that's what I'm doing here. There were just a couple of areas that I thought could use another snowflake. So I wanted to mention that if you use my name in the comments when you place an order with Shimmerz Paints, you'll receive a free gift. Shimmerz Paints has a subscription option, so that if you're interested in getting the Color Kitz collection every month, you could just sign up for a subscription and then they will send you the kit automatically. And there's a link in the description box if you're interested in that option. Often when I'm scrapbooking, I need some solids, and so I often use the paints that are in the kit to create those. So what I'm doing now is I'm creating some mats for a strip of photos that I'm going to be using on the background. And here you can see that I have 3 different shades of blue, but in the end I decided that I was going to add a purple mat, so I also create a purple mat and I use 2 blue and 1 purple mat around my strip of photos. I also wanted to add some contrast between some snowflake ephemera pieces that I wanted to add to the background and the background. So I thought that if I made the snowflakes stand out a little bit by putting some solids behind them, that would make the layout a little bit more readable. So the blue color here is the Shimmerz Cold Shoulder again. And then I also used a Creameez, and that's called Power to the Purple. And I like those touches of purple on the layout. I think that the purple also goes so well with the pink and the blue. And that's one of the things I love about these kits. You don't have to really think about color combinations. They're already created for you. So these are the snowflakes that I got from the ephemera pack, and I just attached them down to the pieces of cardstock that I painted with the Shimmerz paints. And now I'm going to use my detail scissors and I'm going to fussy cut out a little mat around each one of the snowflakes. So this collection was perfect for the winter that we're having. In New York, we've had a lot of snowstorms. I know a lot of states in the United States have been hit with snowstorms. Some states that usually don't get snow or definitely don't get large amounts of snow. But we had a storm recently where there's just snow everywhere. We probably got about a foot of snow, and it's been really, really cold, so none of the snow has melted. And then we're expecting to get snow again next week. So yeah, definitely have snow and snowflakes on my mind. I love inking the edges of elements that are ephemera pieces, and then especially that these have the mats around them. I just love the little touch that inking the edges gives to the paint. So I use a couple of different inks that I had in my stash, and I ink the edges of all of those snowflakes. I also ink the edges of all of these mats that I'm going to be placing around my photo. So my photo is actually 4 photos. I took these photos of my dogs outside in the snow. This wasn't taken in the current storm because the snow was just so deep that it was difficult for them to stand in the snow. Now they've made little trails around the backyard. They keep running in the same spots and it's flattened down the snow a little bit. But there was a lot of snow. My 2 biggest dogs on the left, they're pretty big dogs, and they were all the way up to the top of their legs in the snow. I decided that for my title, I was going to copy one of the sentiments that was included in the kit. There was a little ephemera piece that said, "Just Chillin," and I thought, let me make that a little bit bigger so that I can feature it a little bit more so it could be the title on the layout. So I'm using these Heidi Swapp letters that I found at the dollar store. They have a resist to them, so there's little dots on them, and when I sprayed the paint on them, it covered the letter except where those dots are, and I think that it just creates a really cool look on the letters. And the color that I'm using here is a Vibez called Snow Way Man. And I, once again, added the color multiple times to the letters just to build up the color a little bit. And I really love the way that these letters turned out. They're probably about the same darkness as the mats around the snowflakes. And I think that ended up being a nice look for the layout. So I'm using some blue ink that was on my dauber, and I'm inking all the way around the outside of my mixed media background. And then I wanted to have a border, so I gutted one of the pattern paper pieces and I attached my mixed media background down to the back of it. And then here is my strip of photos, and I'm adding lots of adhesive to the back, but I am going to add some glue because the mixed media, the modeling paste in particular, doesn't really like the ATG adhesive to stick to it. So I'll have to go back in and add some wet glue to make it stick down permanently. So I really like this embellishment that has the pine trees in different sizes. I think that that's a nice embellishment for on top of the photos. I ended up taking it away, but before the layout was done, I put it back on again because I just think that it goes perfectly in that center spot. I also added a snowman to the left-hand side of the strip of photos, and then one of the dots on the upper right-hand side, and then I also added a heart there too. And although the snowman stays exactly where it is, I end up switching out the embellishments that are on the right side of the strip of photos. So I'm playing around with adding sentiments on top of the strip of photos. I have two different ones, but like I said, I do end up putting those trees back again. On the bottom of the strip of the photos, I love those brush strokes. They're like brush strokes of color, but they also have snowflakes on them. I think they're cool. They just kind of remind me of like a cold breeze. So I attached down those two sentiments, and I also arranged the snowflakes at the top of the layout. And I didn't go too crazy over analyzing where I put them, which is a shocker for me. And then after I placed them down, I used some adhesive and I attached them down to the background. And then for the snowman, I put a little bit of foam on the left-hand side, and that foam will keep him from being slanted because the right side is sitting on top of the photos, so he needed a little bit of height on the left-hand side. So now I'm inking the edges of all of these letters that I am going to be placing down for my title. I'm using a distress oxide called Peacock Feathers. Again, I'm just looking for that kind of finished looking edge and also the contrast that inking the edges creates with the background. And then I had to do the same thing with the strokes of color. I added a little bit of foam to the bottom of the purple one that's on the bottom once again, so it will sit flat on the layout. So I hope that if you are thinking about making a mixed media background, that you will try it out. I always like to encourage people to give it a try. Most of the time, the mixed media backgrounds that I make look like a hot mess until I start layering everything else on top of them. So I feel like it could be frustrating if you start making one and it doesn't look amazing. I find for myself, it usually doesn't look so great until I start adding things to them. So I would definitely recommend giving it a try. And it's very easy to try that if you have all these colors and embellishments that go together. But it's definitely worth trying no matter what materials you have. Just get a piece of paper, add some paint, and see what happens. That's my advice anyway. So I thought I could use some little snowflakes. So there was a strip of snowflakes that were smaller. So I decided that instead of using that ephemera piece as a strip, I would cut all of those snowflakes out, and I like the way that looked. I think it added a nice touch to the layout. I like the way now there are large, medium, and small snowflakes kind of scattered all around. So I'm continuing to try to make those two sentiments, snow much fun and snow happy, work, but as I had mentioned, I decided that I was going to just add those trees back in, and I keep the sentiment that says snow much fun, and I place that at the base of the trees. And then I add a little bit of foam to the back of snow much fun to give it a little bit of dimension. So I really wanted some photos of the dogs in the snow. So I went outside with Rory. She's the third one from the left, and she really paid no attention to me when we were outside. So my daughter suggested that I get a treat. So I did that, and you could see that they are all very attentive. If I didn't have a treat, I'm sure that I would have had a much harder time getting a picture of them facing me. But with a few treats in my pocket, I was able to get a photo of all of them looking my way. There was no way I was going to try to get a photo of all of them together, but I am glad that I got all these separate photos, and I printed them out really small on my Canon selfie. So I decided that even though I really like the turquoise dots that has the snowflake on it, it was the only really dark turquoise thing on the page, so I thought it stood out a little bit. I ended up using it on my second layout for January, but for this layout, I just thought it was a little bit too dark. So I added a different one of the dots that says, "Baby, it's cold outside," and then a small heart. And now I'm adding a couple of iridescent jewels to the snowflakes. I got these quite a while ago in Hobby Lobby. I love the finish of them. They really remind me of snow. So I thought of them right away when I saw these snowflakes. So I don't remember what I used, but I used one of the letters or the punctuation that was in the chipboard letters, and I cut out a little apostrophe so I could put it at the end of Chillin. You just can't have the word Chillin without having a little apostrophe, so I attached that down. And then I had some really teeny tiny little jewels. I thought that those would look nice, kind of sprinkled all around the background. There was a little defect in the printing of the photo on the right-hand side, a little spot where the color got kind of messed up when it was printing. So I even put a couple little jewels on the photos just so that there wouldn't just be one jewel covering up that little spot. So I put another one on the other side, but I do that a little bit later on. But it looked fine. I never thought to add jewels to the photos before, and it ended up covering up the spot and looking nice and shiny and sparkly. So these little jewels are the very last touch that I add to this layout, and the layout is complete. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I hope to see you again soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.